Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Friday, May 27th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 100 days. The game against Michigan in 184 days. As we head into Memorial Day weekend, we're going to start one of the fixtures of off-season content, the season previews for teams on Ohio State's schedule for the upcoming season. We're not going to be doing these in any particular order, but the plan is that we'll get through the whole schedule before the Notre Dame kicks off in exactly 100 days. What could possibly go wrong? Something that definitely went right this week is that Kyle Rowland of the Toledo Blade is my guest this morning. He covers the Toledo Rockets. He has spent more than a few days in the Ohio Stadium press box on the Ohio State beat over the years as well. Kyle, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to talk.
Kyle, I think when people think about Toledo football, they think of the Rockets as being one of the real powerhouses in the MAC. They won 9 or more games in every season but one from 2011 to 2017. Had some 10 and 11 win seasons in there. And then since then, they're just 24 and 20. So I guess what changed around the program, or maybe what changed on the MAC on the whole, that brought about, sort of that step back in what they're doing every year?
Yeah, I don't know if anything necessarily changed in the MAC. When you look at it, Northern Illinois, which is in Toledo's West Division, has actually won 8 of the past 13 division championships. I don't know if a lot of people realize how dominant kind of Northern has been. So that hasn't necessarily changed. And I mean, Toledo was good under Tim Beckman, which they probably should have beat Ohio State in 2011, the last time these two teams played. And then it kind of carried over to the Matt Campbell area, and it carried over in the beginning of the Jason Candle area, won the 2017 MAC championship. But ever since then, despite having 5 consecutive top-ranked classes in the MAC, Toledo just hasn't won the games. Like you said, they're 24 and 20. There have been some issues with the defense in prior years where they were, in the 120th, near 130, almost the worst in the country, which obviously is a big problem, especially in the MAC when you're playing a lot of high-flying offenses. And then there's been quarterback play problems the last few years, ever since Logan. Oh my God, I'm drawing a total blank on the quarterback before. But
Woodside?
Logan Woodside, sorry. Yeah. And, last year, Carter Bradley started out the season. There was a kind of a 2 quarterback system with he and DeQuan Finn, who eventually became the starter. Bradley, the son of Gus Bradley, the longtime NFL assistant coach, just wasn't accurate, just really couldn't get it done to the level Toledo needed to win. Jason Candle's an offensive guy, and the MAC is, based on having these, great quarterbacks and pretty good passing numbers. And it just didn't work out. So that's kind of where the struggles have come. There have been some, I would call play calling issues. Jason has a different opinion than I do on that. I think they probably should have utilized the run game a little bit more when they had Bryant Koback, who was a 1,000-yard rusher 4 straight seasons. But I don't know. I guess you could say it's a multitude of things. But now, this year, things look set up to be that MAC West, MAC championship type of team. I think some of the contenders are maybe a little more down. I think Toledo's kind of risen a little bit. They had some promise in the month of November last season that they could maybe, build off that momentum going into 2022.
Well, anytime we do one of these previews, I mean, what is rule number 1? You have to talk about the quarterback, because that's the position in the field everyone wants to talk about. So let's talk about the quarterback. You mentioned Bradley not really working out last year and DeQuan Finn taking over as the starter there. It sounds, based on reading some of your reporting earlier this spring, like they think they may have sort of found the answer there in Finn. Is that kind of where are they feeling reasonably confident about him going into the season?
Yeah, they're definitely confident. And Jason Candle, I don't know, maybe has a little trestle in him. He plays it kind of close to the vest. And if he is publicly confident about something, that tells you like, oh, this guy must be pretty good. Because that usually isn't the way he'll talk to reporters. So, and just if you watch, how good he was in November, I think one thing that really stuck out last year is this was a first-year starter. He was a third-year freshman last year because he redshirted and had his COVID year. So he'll be a 4th-year junior this year, which is a bizarre, or 4th-year sophomore this year, which is kind of a bizarre statement. But anyway, he had basically never played in college until last season. And he has 18 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, which I think kind of stands out that, you avoid the trouble to that extent without playing. You have a number of touchdown passes. Toledo's offense kind of clicked on all cylinders once he kind of got into his rhythm after having a few starts. He ended up starting 7 games last season. Didn't end great in the bowl game, though. But I don't know. Bowl games are kind of weird. You never know, how motivated teams are and stuff like that. But he's by far the hardest worker on the team, which helps a lot, I think. He goes out and works with Tom House in California during the summer. He works on his nutrition and obviously lifting weights, all that kind of stuff. But he was a guy who was the state player of the year in Michigan, which obviously pretty solid. It's not Ohio or Pennsylvania, but Michigan's got really solid football. Was under the radar essentially because he was only a running quarterback in high school. Didn't really throw that much. When he got to Toledo, he had a really funky throwing motion. Was not accurate at all, and he's kind of built it up and become a pretty solid, fairly accurate guy. And it looks like he's going to, take the reins here and be the starter for several years. And I think Toledo will probably be better for it.
Toledo, like a lot of teams, has brought in a bunch of talent from the transfer portal. And don't worry, we will get to former Buckeye Dallas Gant in just a minute. But first, let's talk about running back Penny Boone. He sounded like someone who, is maybe a little higher ranked than your typical Toledo player. They just brought him out of the portal. Are they looking at him as a potential impact guy this season? Or if not, who's going to be the bell cow on offense as a running back?
For sure. I think he's going to be the guy. Micah Kelly is someone who's behind him, who's been good for several years. But I think it's going to be Penny. Talking about a guy who was a 4-star recruit, I think, coming out of high school. He's from Detroit, went to the same high school as DeQuan Finn. Goes to Maryland, doesn't really do much at Maryland. And now he ends up at Toledo, which is a pretty good situation for a guy like him. Was certainly a highlight in the spring. There was a video floating around where he hurdled a defender in the spring and landed on his feet and kept running. It was one of the better hurdles I've ever seen a running back have. And he's a big guy. He's a stocky kind of downhill force type of runner. He's not your breakaway speed, 220-pound guy. So I think he'll be kind of the lead runner, but they'll run multiple guys. That's kind of their MO. And then, wide receiver, I think you mentioned the transfer portal, and Toledo got stung, I guess you could say, by the transfer portal a few weeks ago. Matt Landers was going to be, I truly believe he could have been like a third-team All-America type receiver this year. He was going to have 1,500 yards. He was going to be just lighted up. Didn't really get introduced to the offense much last year until November. But when he did, he was like a just dynamite, dynamic guy who caused major, major problems for defenses. He's 6'5". He originally was at Georgia, then transferred to Toledo. And now he ended up at Arkansas. And I think he's going to be really good for Arkansas. I think he's going to be an NFL draft pick. And he just would have been a big, big, big time difference maker for this Toledo offense this season. So it definitely hurts that he left.
Yeah, the transfer portal giveth and the transfer portal taketh away. I think Ohio State fans have seen that recently with Joe Burrow leaving and Jamison Williams leaving, but also bringing in a bunch of guys. And Toledo's, that's true at pretty much every level of the sport, it seems. On the defensive side of the portal, on the side of the ball, the portal giveth. They gave it Dallas Gant materialized. He came to Ohio State from Toledo out of high school. Then he hit the portal last September, headed back up 23 to be a Rocket this year. He didn't commit to Toledo until February, so I assume he was not in for spring ball. Is he expected to play a big role this fall?
Yeah, he'll definitely play a role. And as you mentioned, he is not in Toledo yet. Still, I guess, actually, it might be this week, I think, that he's coming, because he stayed at Ohio State and got his degree and all that kind of stuff. So he was enrolled throughout I guess it's called the spring semester, right? And then during spring break, actually, though, he came to Toledo and watched all of their spring practices. So I guess you could say he got a little head start on everything. Clearly, he's read the playbook, all that kind of stuff. He's from Toledo, so he had a very good relationship with Jason Candle prior to coming to Toledo. That obviously played a big part in him ending up there. Defensively, I mean, Toledo is really good defensively. I don't think Dallas Gant's necessarily going to come in and be the best guy on their defense. I think he's going to be a solid addition and, be a very good MAC linebacker. But I mentioned earlier how the defense held Toledo back before. So they make this change at defensive coordinator prior to the pandemic year. Vince Karras comes in, the former head coach at Mount Union, the son of Larry Karras, the legendary coach. And I mean, it was like an instant change. I mean, they went from in the hundreds to total defense. I think they've been 35th back-to-back years. Really good. Best defense in the MAC. Front seven, it was been great. Obviously, they had Tyson Anderson, safety that just got drafted, and cornerback Samuel Womack was also drafted. So they've kind of had the total package there at defense. The Notre Dame game last year was, I think, kind of a wow moment for maybe people around the country and certainly people in the MAC as they watch that, because I mean, Notre Dame's offensive line, I mean, they just got their lunch completely ate by Toledo's defensive line. And I mean, you just never see a MAC defense do that type of stuff against a big time Power 5 opponent. Obviously, Notre Dame went 11-1 last year, I think. So it was pretty unbelievable. They bring, basically all those guys back. Some of them will certainly be draft picks. One of them is also a transfer. Judge Culpepper came in from Penn State. They've got Desjuan Johnson, Jamal Hines, Terrence Taylor is another guy. But they certainly have some names there that will get some NFL play here after this season.
When you look at the advanced analytic systems like SP Plus, that kind of backs up what you were just saying. It looks like they're going to have to be leading on that defense. SP Plus has them 25th on defense, 87th in the country on offense. So it will have to be a probably defensive-led team this year, and that doesn't obviously account for necessarily all of the transfers and all of that. So they will probably be defense first this year. Is sort of what I think I'm gleaning from both you and SP Plus. SP Plus also makes it pretty clear they're probably not a big surprise. They're probably going to be quite a big underdog when they come to Columbus. Is the opportunity just to play in Ohio Stadium something that they're looking forward to as a program, that opportunity, and, even something they've used in recruiting?
Yeah. I mean, Toledo's history has been kind of big game hunting, kind of on two fronts. Number one, former athletic director Mike O'Brien is one of the best schedulers in the country, probably the best football scheduler at the Power 5 level, or at the Group of 5 level. Toledo's known for somehow getting these Power 5 opponents to come into their stadium these last 20 years. I mean, they've had Boise State, Arizona, Missouri, Miami, Florida, Kentucky, Minnesota, Purdue. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, the names they've brought in. I'm probably forgetting some. Colorado, I know, is one of them. So there's been that side of it. But then there's also been the side of they've beaten Penn State in 2000. They beat Michigan in 2008, I guess it was, I think. They should have beat Ohio State in 2011. They probably should have beat Notre Dame last year. So a lot of times, I mean, and those teams were a little down. And Notre Dame, people, they weren't as good as their record was last year. I think that's fair to say, certainly at the beginning of the year when Toledo caught them. But that said, I mean, it still kind of speaks to how Toledo is able to rise up in these games. So I don't by any means expect Toledo to come down to Columbus and beat Ohio State. But I don't think they're also just going to roll over. I don't think this is going to be, similar to when Akron comes there or Bowling Green, a few years back, or some of these other MAC programs that just get run out of the place. Although Ohio State is going to be, exceptionally good this season. But I think it would be a bad sign if Toledo lost, 56-17. I think they're good enough on defense and they can create some things on offense that it shouldn't be just a total kind of demoralizing blowout.
Ohio State should be pretty darn good this year. Ohio State, which I guess I'm not breaking news there, but I looked at the SP Plus numbers earlier this week, and if I remember right, the gap between, on just on the offensive side of the ball, number 1 Ohio State and number 2, I think it was Alabama, was number 2 on offense, is bigger than the gap between number 2 Alabama and number 31, I think, which was like Texas. So yeah, Ohio State is projected to have the best offense in the country by like a touchdown. So that seems pretty good.
I was just going to say, I think it's going to be a historic year for Ohio State this year. I think they're that good.
Yeah, I think you probably have a lot of Ohio State fans thinking the same thing down in the Columbus area. Those are the expectations for Ohio State. What's the expectation for Toledo this year? I mean, is this the year they get back in that MAC title conversation? And what is the biggest factor that's going to determine how far they go this year?
Yeah, I mean, so Toledo, I don't know, maybe on a much smaller scale, obviously, but I mean, it's a little like Ohio State. I mean, I obviously spent so much time covering Ohio State, so I'm well aware of all this stuff. But I mean, Toledo's got a pretty rabid fan base. They get great fan support. Games in September and October, not November when they go to the stupid weeknight stuff. But the tailgating scene is great at the Glass Bowl, and everyone's excited and all this stuff. And that also translates to the expectations. Like if they're not good, like the coach hears it. They're not just, this small little MAC fan base who's like, whatever, we're just happy to be playing. They have expectations and they're upset when they don't accomplish them. So, I mean, Jason Candle certainly is feeling some heat right now. His approval rating is not through the roof by any means. And they believe that, they should be in the MAC championship game every single year, kind of like Ohio State thinks Big Ten championship every single year. And I do think it's a big year. Obviously, there's a new athletic director here. That's always an interesting situation. Jason Candle was in the running for the Miami offensive coordinator job, decided not to take it. Really thinks he's got a good team coming back this season, thinks that they can win. A little bit of a tricky schedule. I mean, obviously, Ohio State is an automatic loss. The week after Ohio State, they go all the way across the country to play San Diego State, which is a pretty good group of 5 non-conference game. And then they have to fly all the way back across the country to get home. And they play Central Michigan that next week, who is going to be one of the best teams in the MAC. And then the next week they play at Northern Illinois. So they have their 4 toughest games in 4 consecutive weeks with some, tough travel in between. So you're going to learn a lot about Toledo in late September and early October. But they certainly expect to be in Detroit for the MAC championship game. And anything short of that, I mean, failure is a strong word. You kind of have to see how it plays out, but it won't be a happy bunch in Toledo if they're not in the MAC championship game.
Well, you've mentioned a couple times, and we've mentioned a couple times that you have been on the Ohio State beat over the years. So I'm guessing that an audience of Ohio State folks probably follows you at a higher rate than they follow most, people on the MAC beat. But if they do not follow you on Twitter, let people know where they can find you on Twitter and then where they can read your work about the Rockets.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's just my name, Kyle Rowland. ToledoBlade.com has all my work. You can download the Blade app as well if you're into the phone game. And that is all where all my work is at.
All right. Well, looking forward to seeing you again in person this fall. That'll be fun, and should be another. Those MAC games are always pretty interesting. The underdog a lot of times comes like really ready to play, and it ends up being a better game than you might expect. So, looking forward to that one. That'll be week 3 this fall in Ohio Stadium. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Monday is Memorial Day. I don't know if we're going to do a show Monday, so we will probably talk to you on Tuesday.